The podcast you're about to listen to is from a book series on post-qualitative, new materialist, and critical posthumanist research. I'm Karen Barad and chief editor of this new Routledge series. You can find it on the following website, www.postqualitativeresearch.com.
Hi, Veronica.
Hello, Siddique.
So here we are. I wonder if Karen Barad will watch this. Hi, Karen. That meeting with Karen at Monkey Valley was quite important for both of us. By that point, we had both read Meeting the Universe Halfway, and Karen's new paper, Troubling Times and Ecologies of Nothingness, was about to be presented to us. I think for both of us, that paper would be so important. And we actually read that paper through our own practice in this chapter. So let me start off by asking you, how did geomatics and obstetrics get connected and entangled to make up this chapter?
Thank you, Siddique. Thanks for introducing our chapter and the special moment. I'd like to quote from Barad's page 296 at Meeting the Universe Halfway. A delicate tissue of ethicality runs through the marrow of being. There is no getting away from ethics. Mattering is an integral part of the ontology of the world in its dynamic presencing. And to be honest, grappling with issues of ethics in our past working life in many ways brought Siddique and myself together. We had the same supervisor. We were looking at our work in the academia in ways that would foreground ethics. And Karen Barad's relational ontology brought us together. We would talk, we would discuss together while we waited for our reading group, while we were in our reading group, and also we tended to drive home together and discuss further. So thank you, Siddique. It was a very enriching time that really led to this chapter in this book and our PhDs, which were finalized soon after meeting Barad at Monkey Valley. So I'd like to ask you a question, Siddique. Was there anything that Barad said to you that really was useful for your PhD during that time at Monkey Valley, where it was cold and raining, but it was a really inspiring time?
Yeah, it was. Thanks. So I think that the point that stuck with me the most was what Barad said about gestures to the future. And so when we presented to Karen, you remember that I told the story of Van Riebeck's hedge. Van Riebeck, who was the Dutch commander at the original colonization of the Cape, ordered his land surveyor to mark out the farms of the first free burghers, as they were called, and it was right here in Cape Town. To keep the local indigenous Khoi people away, he started building and planting this boundary hedge. And what I did was I put the current map of the demographics of Cape Town in relation to the boundary hedge. And I showed that Black people still largely live outside the location of the original Dutch settlement. And Barad said that the Dutch were gesturing to a specific future. And that future is still happening, of course. Cape Town still being one of the most unequal societies in the world. And the spatial legacies of colonialism is still very much here. So the idea of gesturing to the future stayed with me. The Dutch, of course, gestured to a specific future, a future of perhaps exclusion and dominance, just as we as educators are gesturing to a specific future. So I tell my engineering students that they must think about the future that they are gesturing to. Previous engineers had a specific vision of the future governed by their own principles, by their own ethics, whether it be like making maximum profit or perhaps providing services to a large number of people, or maybe a few people, or not worrying about the environment perhaps, etc. So in a society in which people live with ancestors, I like to think of us as future ancestors. And I tell my students, when you are an ancestor, what will you be saying by the things that you did? And also, another thing that stuck with me is that Barad allowed me to get more confident in my creativity and encouraged experimentation. Let me ask you, Veronica, what did Barad's relational ontology, as your theoretical approach, what did it bring to your own research project?
Yes, thank you, Siddique. Agential realism, relational ontology really helped me take risks and experiment in unpacking aspects of students learning in obstetrics in their 4th year when they are initiated into obstetrics and they witness violences unexpectedly, and really trying to unpack what is going on in the labor ward, what aspects of incapacitating students to respond to the violences, and really looking at how matter matters and encouraging students to share their reflections rather than keeping them private, to say we need to look beyond the individuals, beyond individual competence, but look at relationality. What is emerging in the students' learning? And boundaries became important as well. The boundary of graduation is so fixed in our academia. And like you, I was encouraging students to say, where are you going? What about your practice beyond graduation? How are you going to bring compassion and care back into an environment that has normalized violence? So, Siddique, just going back to what made an impact on you, in your chapter, you chose a digital story of one of your students from the Eastern Cape, and I wondered whether you can tell us more about it, why you chose it, and why that one in particular.
Yeah, that's a story that followed me for many years, and it's still following me. To go back a bit, before that story was made, it was in my GIS class at CPUT, and we were talking about xenophobia and the Great Bantu Migration. Somehow those two themes emerged. And like how Barad encouraged us to be creative, I asked my students to do the same. So I asked them to produce digital stories using maps. And this particular story engaged with Gestures to the Future. It was produced by a certain Mr. Zanukolo Palmer, Zanu, I call him, who later went on to become a performance poet, in addition to a geomatics practitioner. And during those conversations in class, Zanu was already thinking a lot about his history, about his ancestry. So he already knew a lot about where he came from. Through his digital story, he traced his ancestry all the way back to the Great Lakes of Africa and the movement through Central Africa, through Southern Africa, and onto the Eastern Cape of South Africa. And besides being this really rich, visually informative story because of the maps and all the spatial analysis that he did, it was also, in my view, it was a wonderful artwork in itself, because he combined Xhosa narrative with history, poetry, etc. And in mapping his history, he was given an opportunity to link geomatics, GIS, mapping, engineering education to an African ancestral journey, which is still continuing, of course, because he is moving and his children will move and so on. This particular arrangement of knowledge practices, a light was shone onto an area of silence. And I think for a moment, Black history and African stories were valued through the lens of geomatics. And difference in this case was seen as positive. And to this day, when I play the story, Black pride emerges when the video is shown. So it was really a no-brainer for me to choose this particular story.
Thank you, Siddique. I really see that both our projects have been producing and generating conversations and dialogue from hidden, silenced areas, from current students and their past, and hopefully productive and offering more new potential for the future. So thanks so much. I think it's exciting that both our projects are open, not closed, and there's more to come.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you would like to know more about this chapter, please visit the website www.postqualitativeresearch.com. And please stay tuned for future podcasts.